Welcome back to our edpm class. In today's class, we're going to look at using punctuation marks while we are typing. We're going to focus on the comma, the semicolon, and the colon. Before we can go into these punctuation marks, we must know what are punctuation marks. Most of you guys have used punctuation marks in writing composition or letters and so forth. But what really are punctuation marks? Punctuation marks are marks or signs used within text to clarify its meaning. So basically a punctuation mark helps you to understand what a text or a paragraph or a sentence is saying or what it wants to portray to you. Punctuation marks help the reader to understand the text better. Without punctuation mark, we won't be able to know or to understand the writer's feeling or what feeling the writer wants us to have while reading the text. For example, we won't know if the writer is asking us a question, if the writer wants you to have a feeling of excitement, or the writer want you to pause. We won't know that without using punctuation marks. And punctuation marks are helpful because they help us to understand the text better. So let's look at the comma. As you can see, the comma, that's what a comma is, the sign or symbol for a comma. And the purpose of a comma, we use the comma to separate elements in a list. We use it to indicate a pause within a sentence. One character space is normally left after a comma. So when we are typing and after we have placed our comma, when we are typing, we leave a space before we start to type. We do not join the word up with the comma. So here's an example how we use a comma. So let's read the first example here, or look at the first example that we have here on the comma. Let's read it together. The little boy loves to play cricket, football, Monopoly, and basketball. So you notice there where the commas are. It is separating the items within a list. And what list are we talking about in this situation here? The lists are the things that the boys or games that the little boy love to play, and the games are cricket, football, Monopoly, and basketball. And in this situation here, we place a comma after each item except for the last two items, because the last two items is separated by the word and. So we place a comma after cricket, after football, and between Monopoly and basketball. Because it's the last two items in the list, we use the word "and" there. And if you notice that after the comma, there's a space there between cricket and football, and the reason for that being is that we don't want the word to be joined up with the comma, so we leave a space before we start to type again. Now there's a note when using comma with numbers. There is no space after a comma when typing numbers. So when we're typing number, we leave no space after typing them. Let's look at the example here. We have here $67,589. And how we know where to put a comma? We put a comma after every three digits counting from our right side. So we have 1, 2, 3. After the 5, we place a comma, then we write 7 and 6. And we leave no space between there when we place that comma there. And look at the bottom part there. Can you see that there's a space between the comma there? Now how does that look? That looks like there are two different set of numbers there with the space there. So once it's a big number, we have to separate it using comma with every 3 digit. And when we place our comma there, we do not place a space because it will look like if it's a separate number. In the second example here, it looked like we are showing two numbers here, 67 and 589, because of the space. And the one on the top, the one without the space, you can read it as $67,589. Now we're going to look at the semicolon. Now a semicolon, what is the purpose of a semicolon? A semicolon is used to indicate a long pause between two clauses. Now you might ask yourself, what are clauses? Now a clause is a group of words that has a subject and a predicate that is part of a sentence. Again, a clause is a group of words that has a subject and a predicate. Now the subject is what is being talked about, and the predicate is what is being talked about, the subject. For example, we could say the boy is walking. The boy is walking. The subject is, who are we talking about? We are talking about the boy. And what about the boy? The boy is walking, and that is the predicate. So let's look at this example here, how we use a semicolon. Let's read. The bag needs to be washed, and we place a semicolon there. It is dirty. So we have two clauses there. The first clause is the bag needs to be washed. The second clause is it is dirty. Now the first group of words there, it is stating, what is it talking about? It is talking about the bag. So the bag is the subject in this first part, this group of word here. And what is being talked about the bag? It is being said that the bag needs to be washed. That is the predicate. The second clause there, it is dirty. It is dirty. What is the subject there? The subject there is it. And it is referring to as the bag from the first class. And what is being said about the it or the bag? That it is dirty. So dirty is the predicate. So we have two clauses there, and because there are two clauses there, we use a semicolon to separate each clause. And notice that we place a space after we have typed the semicolon there, and before we start typing the second clause, so don't have confusion there. The second purpose of using a semicolon is to separate a complex list. Back we discussed that a comma is used to separate a list, but that was a simple list we use. A semicolon can also be used to separate a complex list. And when we talk about a complex list, we're talking about something that a list that has more than one component inside. Look at the example here to further understand what I'm saying. The committee consists of Dr. Joe, West Dem Hospital, Dr. Sam, Lenora Hospital, Dr. Kim, Georgetown Hospital, and Dr. Sue, St. Mercy Hospital. Now you notice that there are four different persons there. Dr. Joe, and it is stating along with Dr. Joe that he's from West Demerara Hospital. So that's a complex part there. And then Dr. Sam is from Lenora Hospital, Dr. Kim is from Georgetown Hospital, and Dr. Sue is from St. Mercy Hospital. If we just had persons named there, Dr. Joe, Dr. Sam, Dr. Kim, and Dr. Sue, it would have been a simple list. But along with their name, there's also another information there stating which hospital they are from. So that make it a complex list because each item has more than one component within it. So in that case, in case like that, we use a semicolon to separate each item within a list there. And just like a comma, we use the word and to separate the last two items within that list. So we use this, we The committee consists of Dr. Joe, West Them Hospital. We put a semicolon there. Dr. Sam, Lenora Hospital. We place a semicolon there. And the last two names, Dr. Kim, Georgetown Hospital. We use the word "and" between Dr. Kim and Dr. Sue there to separate those two items. Now we're going to move on to the colon. Now a colon is used to introduce a list or an idea once the clause before it can stand alone. So we talk about clause before. So we say that a clause is a group of words that has a subject and a predicate. And once that clause can stand alone, it meaning that we can understand what it is saying. We use a colon to introduce a list. Once that clause before can stand by itself, once everyone understand what the group of word is saying. Also take note that when we are typing colon, we leave 2 spaces before we start typing the items in the list. So normally we discuss the comma and the semicolon before, and we just leave 1 space before we start typing after we have typed those symbols. But when we are typing the colon, we leave 2 spaces before we continue typing. So let's look at the example. The store sells the following appliances. Notice that we put a colon there before we list the items or what the store sells. So that clause, there's a store sells the following items. Once someone tell you that, you are understanding that this person is trying to tell you that the store sells the following item. That clause can stand alone. That means that you understand what the person is saying before they continue speaking or listing the items. Then we skip 2 spaces and then we continue typing blenders, stove, television, and washing machine. So let's go over this example again. The store sells the following item. We place our semicolon there because the clause can stand alone. We skip 2 spaces, then we start to type our list: blender, stove, television, and washing machine. I hope that you guys has learned something within this lesson today, and I will see you again in the next class.